Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
The Great Depression was a time when the world's economy became much smaller. Many people lost their jobs, businesses failed, and there was a lot of suffering. This bad time touched almost every part of the world, from Africa and Asia to Europe and the Americas. To understand the Great Depression, we first need to look at how the world was before it started. Before the Great Depression, the United Kingdom was a very powerful country. It supported a global economy where countries could trade freely. This meant they could buy and sell goods to each other without many rules. Poorer regions sold raw materials, like crops, to richer industrial countries. These rich countries used factories to make products from these materials. Then, they sold the finished products all over the world. This created a large network of trade that connected almost every country. The United States of America had a very good position in this world. It was one of the first countries to have many factories. It was also safe and had many people who could work in these factories. People in the USA had good jobs and earned a lot of money. They used this money to buy many new things made in these factories. They also bought shares in companies. The stock market felt like an exciting place to get rich quickly. People bought company shares for two main reasons. First, a company gives you a small part of its profits for each share you own. Second, if a company earned a lot of money, the price of its shares would go up. People could then sell their shares for more money than they paid, making a profit. This idea of making money easily became very popular. Many people even took out loans from banks to buy more shares. They truly believed they could easily sell the shares later, pay back the loan, and still have money left for themselves. But in 1929, the stock market changed very fast. The value of company shares went down a lot, by 40% in just 1 month. If you had bought shares, your money was now worth much less. If you had borrowed money to buy shares, you could no longer sell them for enough money to pay back your bank loan. This happened to many people in the USA. This big crash was the start of the Great Depression. 2. Why it was so bad. After the big stock market crash, many people lost their money. This made them very careful with spending. They stopped buying new things like cars or appliances. Instead, people wanted to save what little they had or pay back any loans. This sudden stop in buying caused a huge problem for the economy. When people bought less, businesses sold much less. Companies did not earn enough money to pay their workers or buy new materials. To save money, many businesses had to make tough choices. They started firing employees, making fewer products, or even closing their doors. This happened across many industries. When people lost jobs, they had even less money to spend. This meant they bought even fewer things, which caused more businesses to sell less and led to even more job losses. It became a very bad cycle, where each problem made the next problem much worse. Many families feared losing their homes and not being able to buy food. Even people with jobs became scared, saving money just in case. Business owners also spent less, worried their companies might fail. This widespread fear and lack of spending deepened the economic crisis. Then, banks started to have big problems. As more people lost jobs and businesses closed, they could not pay back their loans to the banks. This caused many banks to lose a lot of money. Soon, banks began to fail. When a bank failed, people who had saved their money there lost everything. This made people very afraid. Hearing about one bank closing, they rushed to their own banks to take out all their savings. This was called a bank run. Most banks do not keep all money in the building. So, many banks quickly ran out of cash and had to close down, creating a terrifying ripple effect. Another big problem was falling prices. Businesses still produced many goods, but with fewer people buying, prices dropped a lot. You might think lower prices are good. But if prices kept falling, people would wait to buy, hoping for even cheaper deals later. This meant big purchases were put off. Businesses sold even less, leading to more companies failing and more people losing their jobs. The Great Depression was not just one problem. It was a terrible combination of all these issues, connected and making each other worse, causing a massive economic downturn. 3. The USA tries to fix it. The United States government started to look for ways to help the country. Their first idea was to put new taxes on foreign goods. These taxes were called tariffs. The government hoped that by making foreign products more expensive, people would buy more goods made in the USA. But this idea did not work as planned. Other countries then put their own taxes on American goods. This meant businesses in the USA could not sell their products easily to other countries. Many American companies lost customers and went out of business. This first policy made the economic problems even worse, and it was stopped later. Next, the USA wanted to stop prices from falling further. To do this, the government changed how its money worked. It stopped using something called the gold standard. Before, the value of paper money was tied to gold. People could exchange their money for gold. This meant the government could not print too much new money. By leaving the gold standard, the government could print more money. Printing more money can make goods more expensive. The government printed just enough money to stop prices from falling too low. This helped to stabilize the cost of goods and services. The government then used this new money for public projects. They spent it on building new roads, schools, and parks across the country. These projects created many jobs for people who were unemployed. These new buildings and infrastructure also helped the country in the long term, making it easier for businesses and people to connect. At the same time, the government started new programs to help people in need. They raised taxes to give financial aid to those who were suffering. This help went to people who had lost their jobs, people with disabilities, and older people. Giving this kind of direct help to citizens was not common for the government before the Great Depression. To fix the broken banking system, the government took several steps to make banks safer. First, banks now had to keep more money in their vaults. This was to make sure they had enough cash if many people wanted to take out their savings. Second, the government announced bank holidays. For a few days, all banks were closed. This stopped people from rushing to take out all their money at once. Third, government teams checked banks. Only banks that were found to be safe were allowed to open again. These actions helped people to trust banks more. Because people believed their money was safe, they kept their savings in the banks. This prevented more banks from failing and slowly brought confidence back to the economy. 4. Latin America's problems. Latin America's economies were closely linked to other countries. They sold many natural goods like coffee, meat, copper, and oil. These products went mostly to Europe and the USA. But then the Great Depression started. People in Europe and the USA bought much less. Prices for Latin American goods fell a lot, sometimes by more than half. Farmers and workers could not earn enough money, leading to more poverty. Also, countries like the USA and those in Europe put new taxes on foreign goods, making it harder for Latin American countries to sell their products. Governments in Latin America tried different ways to solve these problems. One way was to control prices. They sometimes destroyed extra goods, like large amounts of coffee, so that prices would not fall even more. For example, Brazil burned millions of bags of coffee in the 1930s. Another important step was to make their money cheaper. They did this by printing more money. When their money was worth less, their products became cheaper for other countries to buy. This helped them sell more goods to Europe and the USA. Finally, Latin American countries started new factories to make their own products. Because it was hard to import goods, they decided to produce them themselves. They used local resources, for example, making clothes from local cotton or sugar from local sugarcane. This created jobs and provided goods for their people. This strategy was very successful in places like Brazil. By 1938, most manufactured goods sold there were produced in Brazil itself. These strong actions helped Latin America's economy get better. They recovered faster than many other parts of the world from the Great Depression. 5. Trouble in Europe. Europe was still recovering from World War I. The war had destroyed homes and factories and killed many people. New countries had to build their governments and systems from scratch. European factories had a hard time competing with other countries. Nations like the USA and Japan were making newer, cheaper goods. This made it difficult for older European businesses to sell their products. Then the Great Depression reached Europe. Many of the same problems seen in the USA happened there too. Banks failed, and many people lost their savings. Businesses closed, and millions lost their jobs. Prices for goods also fell sharply, which made it harder for companies to earn money. European governments tried different ways to fix these problems. To help with the banking crisis, some governments took control of banks. This made people feel that their money was safe because the government now owned the bank. These banks later became private again. Other countries tried to save money by cutting how much they spent and raising taxes. This policy, called austerity, aimed to show foreign investors that the government could manage its money well. However, it often meant more job losses as businesses that worked with the government lost customers. Many European nations also put special taxes on goods coming from other countries, called tariffs. They hoped people would buy products made at home. But like in the USA, this often led other countries to put their own tariffs on European goods. This made it harder for European companies to sell products abroad, hurting their businesses even more. Some countries saw this problem and decided to work together. Small groups of countries, like Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, removed tariffs between themselves. The Nordic countries did something similar. These groups helped to increase trade among their members. The United Kingdom helped lead Europe towards recovery. It stopped using the gold standard and printed more money. This money was then used for public works projects, like building roads and helping people without jobs, much like the USA had done. Many other European countries followed the UK's example, and their economies also started to improve. Germany chose a very different path. It printed a lot of money, so much that its currency lost almost all its value. The government then took strong control over the economy, setting prices and controlling imports. When a new leader came to power, Germany greatly increased its spending on the military. This helped factories make many goods and created jobs. But it also started Europe on the road to another major war. The Soviet Union had a unique situation. It was a communist country and had very little trade with other nations. Because of this, the Great Depression did not affect the Soviet Union's economy much. However, its economy was also cut off from the benefits of international trade, so it remained poorer than many Western countries, even during their hardest times. 6. Life in Africa and Australia. In 1929, most of Africa was ruled by European countries. African people lived in colonies. They had to pay a special tax to their European rulers. This tax was always in European money, like the British pound or French francs. To get this money, Africans had to work for European companies or grow crops to sell. They would sell these crops to get European money and then pay their tax. But when the Great Depression started, prices for these crops dropped a lot. It became very hard for African people to earn enough money. Many could not pay their taxes anymore. This made life very difficult. Many people became poorer. Some had to leave their farms to work for very little money in European mines or on large farms. others moved to cities, living in crowded slums. Poverty in Africa grew much worse during this time. The problems of European countries also affected their colonies. When European nations put taxes on foreign goods, these tariffs also hurt trade for African colonies. For example, if French colonies grew wheat, it was harder to sell that wheat. African products became cheaper, and fewer people wanted to buy them. African colonies generally recovered only when their European rulers' economies got better. For instance, colonies ruled by the United Kingdom recovered faster. This was because the UK left the gold standard earlier than countries like France, making goods from its colonies cheaper to buy. The hard times and growing poverty led to protests and even fights for freedom in many places across Africa. Far away, Australia and New Zealand also felt the effects of the Great Depression. Their economies were strongly connected to the United Kingdom. They sold many farm products to the UK. When the UK's economy struggled, Australia and New Zealand lost many customers. They tried some things like raising taxes on foreign goods and spending less money, but these did not work well. What helped them was the UK's own economy getting better. They also made a deal so that Australian and New Zealand products could be sold more easily in the UK. 7. Asia and a success story. Most of Asia was a mix of independent nations and colonies. Aside from Japan, much of Asia was rural and poor, with little industry. People mainly lived by farming. However, many colonial governments demanded taxes. People had to pay a tax for each person and also a tax for the land they owned. These taxes had to be paid using European money. This meant farmers could not simply grow food for their families. They needed to grow cash crops like cotton or sugar to sell and earn the foreign money required for taxes. When the Great Depression caused global prices for these crops to fall sharply, it became very hard for Asian farmers to earn enough. Many could not pay their taxes and lost their homes and land. This led to widespread poverty and even peasant uprisings in some areas. Far away, Australia and New Zealand also felt the effects of the Great Depression. Their economies were strongly connected to the United Kingdom. They sold many farm products to the UK. When the UK's economy struggled, Australia and New Zealand lost many customers. They tried some things, like raising taxes on foreign goods and spending less money, but these did not work well. What helped them was the UK's own economy getting better. They also made a deal so that Australian and New Zealand products could be sold more easily in the UK. 7. Asia and a success story. Most of Asia was a mix of independent nations and colonies. Aside from Japan, much of Asia was rural and poor, with little industry. People mainly lived by farming. However, many colonial governments demanded taxes. People had to pay a tax for each person and also a tax for the land they owned. These taxes had to be paid using European money. This meant farmers could not simply grow food for their families. They needed to grow cash crops like cotton or sugar to sell and earn the foreign money required for taxes. When the Great Depression caused global prices for these crops to fall sharply, it became very hard for Asian farmers to earn enough. Many could not pay their taxes and lost their homes and land. This led to widespread poverty and even peasant uprisings in some areas. Trade between different Asian colonies and nations also became harder due to new trade rules set by European powers, further hurting local economies. Some parts of Asia, like British India and China, had a different situation because they used a silver standard for their money. This meant their currency's value was linked to silver. When the price of silver dropped in the world market, their currency, such as the Indian rupee or Chinese yuan, also became cheaper. This was a good thing for trade. It made goods from British India and China cheaper for other countries to buy, helping them sell more products. China even used its cheaper currency to attract money from foreign businesses, which helped its economy grow fast for a time. But this growth in China ended when silver prices later went up and Japan invaded the country in 1931. Japan, however, showed a very different and successful path during the Great Depression. The crisis hit Japan hard, but it recovered remarkably fast. The government appointed a man named Takahashi Korekiyo as the finance minister. He acted quickly, deciding to abandon the gold standard and print more money. He also intentionally made the Japanese yen currency less valuable. He did not wait for years, unlike many other nations. This fast action made Japanese goods much cheaper for people in other countries to buy. This helped Japan's exports and made its economy grow. The Japanese government also invested in new, modern industries, especially heavy industries like making steel and machinery. They helped companies move from older, less profitable businesses to newer, more successful ones. This plan kept people working, allowed them to keep buying things, and stopped many businesses from failing. Because of these policies, many Japanese companies that are famous today became very strong during this time. Takahashi Korekiyo was an important economic thinker whose ideas helped Japan greatly. 8. The world changes forever. The Great Depression was a very hard time for many people around the world. But this difficult time also brought big changes. Before the Depression, most people thought the government should not do much to help the economy or its people. They believed businesses and individuals should manage on their own. However, when millions lost their jobs, their homes, and their savings, this idea changed. People saw that governments needed to do more. Governments started taking a much bigger role in the economy. They began to create new programs. These programs helped people who were poor, unemployed, or old. For example, governments gave money to those who could not find work. They also started to help the elderly, ensuring they had support. This was the beginning of a new idea, the modern welfare state. This means the government works to protect the health and well-being of its citizens. The Depression taught an important lesson. Governments could act to make the economy more stable. They could print money, build things, and support people in need. It showed that even in the worst times, new ways of thinking can appear. Great difficulty often leads to great change that affects the world forever. What do you think was the most important change that came from the Great Depression?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.